evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for episode 6 of Pigskin Glory Football 50 years ago today. This week, we're talking about November 21st through 30th. There's 2 weekends of football and Thanksgiving, so a lot to talk about. Let me introduce the cast going clockwise, starting to my right. Wearing the Nintendo 64 shirt. He may have been born in the late 80s, but he knows more about football in the 70s than most people have forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, germs.
Down on the bottom right from the Northern California region, who in the 70s saw 3 straight world championships for Oakland, Charles from California.
Good evening, folks.
And below me on the screen is a Pennsylvania resident and, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers of the defending champion in 1975. Joining us, maybe not for the whole show, but for the start, Mark.
Howdy, people.
All right, so we start on November 21st, 1975. Do you remember what day of the week November 21st was?
That would be on a Friday, I think. Friday.
It's a Friday. So we start off with NFL transactions. The Falcons have signed running back Larry Crow, formerly from San Antonio in the World Football League. Kansas City has signed defensive end Lou Ross, formerly with the Philadelphia Bell and the Florida Blazers. And the Philadelphia Eagles signed punter Spike Jones while releasing Merritt Kersey and linebacker Kevin Riley. Charles, the World Football League, they won their injunction. Finally, some of the players are getting signed, but we still haven't seen the big names. No Zonka, no Kick. Where are the big names that were in the World Football League?
Heck, no, this is ridiculous. Yeah, it's not for the World Football League. Against those players.
Chris, these players obviously add some depth to Atlanta and Kansas City, but in the main frame, they're not challenging for Super Bowl 10. Miami is, and why haven't the Dolphins brought back their players yet? Chris?
I think, and it's really surprising because remember, Miami's had some injury issues, and I know Nottingham and Mercury have looked good, but at some point you might need some reinforcements given they've had some injuries.
You also had, big name quarterbacks out there like Sonny Six Killer and Daryl LaMonica. Mark, the Lions have had quarterback issues, but they're not bringing in any of the big guns from the World Football League. With the end of the regular season coming up, what is Detroit waiting for?
Yeah, I have no idea. That's a good question. You need all as many arms as possible if you're going to make a playoff push.
Moving on, we have some college classics that are coming up to settle some bowl games this weekend. Michigan plays Ohio State. Of course, the two coaches, Schembechler and Woody Hayes, are always front and center in that one, plus Nebraska and Oklahoma. Chris, how big are these games as far as the postseason bowls are affected?
They are massive and also national championship because you got number 1 and number 2 both playing on the road in places they haven't won it in a while. Ohio State has not beaten Michigan in Michigan under Schembechler, and Nebraska hasn't beaten Oklahoma since that game of the century.
Not to mention potential Heisman Trophy aspects in these games with Archie Griffin, with the running backs for Oklahoma, Joe Washington, I believe. Mark, does the Heisman come down to this weekend? Is this the weekend where the Heisman is won or lost?
It very well could be. Yes, they usually the last game of the season will determine the Heisman Trophy.
Okay, we have an unfortunate story to report. Passing. Go ahead, Charles.
Before we get that, I have more information on the winner of this game. The winner of this big game, Ohio State, Michigan, will go to the Rose Bowl. The loser goes to the Orange Bowl. But if there's a tie, the both sides will go to Pasadena because of a better overall record.
That's a good point. Ties, of course, still a thing in 1975. Now, some unfortunate news to report. November 21st, 1975, passing away, and former end from the Green Bay Packers, Al Nordgaard. He played for them in 1934. There's no obituary that I could find online. We move on Saturday morning, November 22nd. We have some NFL transactions. The Denver Broncos have placed defensive lineman Pete Duranko on the irrevocable waivers. I'm not sure what that means. That means that maybe they they can't take him back. He's done. The New York Jets signed defensive end George Hoey. Hoey takes the place of linebacker Jamie Rivers, who is on the injured reserve, and the Dallas Cowboys running back Scott Laidlaw has been placed on the disabled list. They've acquired linebacker Warren Capone. Now, Mark, you're a Bronco fan. I'm sure you're not aware of who Pete Duranko is, but uh, is this significant? Denver, of course, on the fringe in 75. They at times were relevant. Of course, as the season wears on, it's getting less likely that they'll make their first playoff run.
Yeah, they have. I don't know if it's going to be relevant, especially this late in the year. They have looked better, like you said, but I think the gas tank is going down the E pretty quickly here near the end.
Chris, Dallas, we've talked about the running back situation. Scott Laidlaw not being available for the Cowboys, how does that affect them going into the playoffs?
Well, it's really rough because the running game, they don't have Calvin Hill, they don't have Dwayne Thomas, and they still have to play St. Louis and Washington. Basically, Roger Staubach and Preston Pearson are going to really have to step up their game.
We have another pass. This one is actually much more recent player. Jim Lee Hunt played for the Patriots, the Boston Patriots, from 1960 to 1970. So all of the American Football League run plus the first year in the NFL. He was a defensive end and defensive tackle. Looking at Hunt's accolades, he his number 79 was retired in a Foxborough ceremony, and so that was huge. Just 4 years later after that night to pass away. This is a shocking news in 1975, and for the Patriots organization, there might even be some players that still were teammates of his up through 1970 on the Patriots roster. Now we get into some of the games. It's Ohio State and Michigan. Number 1 beats number 4. The Buckeyes win 21-14. It was yet another matchup of Bo versus Woody for all the roses. Michigan, who had not lost at home since October of 1969, led 14-7 after 3 quarters on a day Archie Griffin was finally held under 100 yards, and 2 Michigan runners went over 100. But clutch catches from Cornelius Green, Pete Johnson running for 2 of his 3 touchdowns, and a late interception in the 4th helped Ohio State rally for their first win at Ann Arbor since 1967. Ohio State, number 1 since October, heads to their 4th straight bowl and is number 1 and is 1 win away from a national championship. Mark, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Archie Griffin was held under 100 yards, but they're going bowling, and they are putting the rose in their teeth right now. What kind of season did Ohio State have?
I I think they've had a season that they were hoping for. You want to be in the Rose Bowl. You want to beat Michigan. You want to go to the Rose Bowl, and you want to compete for the national championship. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Charles, what kind of disappointment for Michigan is this? And they granted, remember, the Big Ten will allow a second bowl competitor now, but still, they've got to be disappointed not to win the.
Obviously disappointed because you may have judged that we would play anybody. It's to beat them. You want to beat the best. You want to beat the Buckeyes, and when you don't, it's a letdown.
Chris, your thoughts on Ohio State beating Michigan?
Well, again, as I mentioned, it's the first time Ohio State has won at Ann Arbor under Bo. First time they've won there since '67. And by the way, first Michigan home loss in 6 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow, that's wow.
Now, here's from this game: the touchdown specialist scores his 3rd of the day. This is Pete Johnson, short yardage specialist, and one of the leading touchdown scorers in all the nation. That's his 3rd touchdown of the day. That was all of Ohio State scoring, scoring against the Wolverines on this Saturday afternoon in Ann Arbor. Moving on from that game. Oops. Okay, here we go. Oklahoma versus Nebraska, the other big game. Number 7 Oklahoma shucks the number 2 Cornhuskers 35-10. Nebraska had looked dominant, and Oklahoma wobbly going into this latest rivalry clash. As for a change, it was Barry Switzer's team who was not higher ranked. This was a close 14-10 Sooner lead through 3 quarters, but Nebraska imploded in the 4th quarter, getting outscored 21-0. Big Red had 6 turnovers on the day, 5 of them converted for OU points. An Oklahoma team that 7 days ago looked to be on the ropes came back up when it counted and are once again the Big 8 champs and Orange Bowl bound to face Michigan. Chris, what does this do to the national championship picture?
Well, it means Nebraska's pretty much out of it, and that Oklahoma's going to rise up. And you look at Oklahoma. If Missouri makes that field goal a week ago, they basically wouldn't have been able. Nebraska would have already been in, but Missouri missed the field goal, and they've had all of their wobbles. But hey, if there's one thing you can say about Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, they wobble, they weeble, but they don't fall down.
And here's what the coach of Oklahoma had Barry Switzer had to say. Nebraska is a great team, but today they made some of the mistakes and turnovers that have hurt us in the past. We were lucky. If Nebraska hadn't made some of those mistakes, we would have had a hard time winning. We made a lot of mistakes in the first half, but we were going off football team to come back and counter on Nebraska's mistakes in the second half.
Mark, how big is this Orange Bowl matchup between Oklahoma and Michigan?
Especially it's definitely big from Oklahoma's point of view. Michigan, I'm sure how they're going to feel or looking at it, knowing that they lost to Ohio State, but for Oklahoma, they're still hoping for an outside shot of a national championship.
You got Barry Switzer versus Bo Schembechler for the Orange Bowl. On New Year's Day, you got Ohio State heading to the Roses, but the day isn't over on this Saturday, November 22nd. Let's move on. Kansas State versus Colorado. Number 9 Colorado tames the Wildcats 33-7. The Buffaloes already knew they were Blue Bonnet Bowl bound. Say that 10 times quickly. Win or lose against the Southwestern Conference runner-up. But you wouldn't have noted on this day as they had nothing at stake big picture. The game was basically over after Billy Waddy returned the opening kickoff 100 yards for a touchdown. The Wildcats missed a field goal on their first drive, and it took the winds out of their sails for a Wildcat team that went winless in Big 8 play. Chris, Colorado had nothing really to play for, and yet they still came out and made a statement against Kansas State. What does that say for the Buffaloes' morale going into the Blue Bonnet Bowl?
I think it says a lot how they didn't allow that Nebraska debacle to creep into their minds, because if you remember, they got blown out by Nebraska, but they've done their part since then. And Colorado's one of those teams that if they were in another conference, they could be the best. But again, they're stuck behind the big 2 of the Big 8. And hey, credit to them, and they'll get their chance to prove that they're still a very good team.
Anybody else want to comment on this game before we move on?
Not this one.
All right, moving on. The Penn State and Pitt. Mark, we're saving this one for you. Number 10, Penn State edges Pitt 7-6. Tony Dorsett followed up last week's Notre Dame masterclass with 125 yards against a solid Nittany Lion defense. But Pitt kicker Carson Long undid Dorsett's dashes by basically costing the Panthers 10 points. A missed extra point and their second quarter touchdown and 3 missed field goals, all in the game's final 5 minutes. What does this say? What does this do for Penn State to wrap up their season with this victory over Pitt?
I think it does a lot. It's an interstate rivalry, and you look forward to that. Pitt's up and coming. They got Tony Dorsett, and I think it'll help them out big time going towards which bowl game they're headed to, if any, and into next year.
Chris, Tony Dorsett had another masterclass of a game. Does he enter 1976 as your Heisman favorite?
I think he's going to have to be, because he's the only star running back of 75 who's back next year. Muncie, Pete Johnson, Archie Griffin, Ricky Bell, they're all going to be gone. Dorsett's going to remain. The question, though, is will Carson Long be back next year, because he single-handedly cost them the win today?
Charles, if you were Carson Long, where would you be hiding out on the Pitt campus tonight?
The Pittsburgh Panthers?
Yes.
Yep.
Probably hanging in his dorm room and not speaking to the press or anything. This was a crushing loss.
Oh, those Panther special teams.
We got Notre Dame versus Miami years before it was Catholics versus convicts. The Fighting Irish rocked the Hurricanes 32-9. Huh. 50 years ago Notre Dame was beating Miami, and they let's not talk about what's going on 50 years later. Miami shoots themselves in the foot with a cannon thanks to 3 fumbles, one of which set up a touchdown and even took a safety. One has to wonder if this game will ever be meaningful for both teams. Chris, Notre Dame mauls Miami. Where do the Hurricanes go from here?
Depends. Can they ask Chuck Foreman if he still has any eligibility left? Because they could use Chuck Foreman right now.
And fans, only 24,900 plus was at the Orange Bowl today.
The fans
Question is, how
don't
many of
turn
those?
out for the Hurricanes in Miami. They definitely turn out for the Dolphins, but they're not a all-around football town. Not in 1975, that's for sure. All right, we're moving on to Sunday morning. We got some NFL transactions. Of course, we're toward the end of the college season, so a lot less to talk about when it comes to college football, as a lot of teams are in the clubhouse as we move forward. Minnesota, they've signed cornerback Pete Athas, formerly with the New York Giants, and also former Orlando Panther of the Continental Football League, and they placed on injured reserve list safety Jeff Wright with a left knee injury. So the Vikings, who are still undefeated this time, making some moves, Chris. Can they remain undefeated without Jeff Wright in the secondary?
Now, considering Athos has some pro experience, it doesn't hurt. And when you look at how Minnesota's had a knack for doing recently in the playoffs, this is the type of move that could benefit them. Because if I know the Vikings, watch Athos come up with a big play down the line.
Bengals and the
And of course, in addition to the Vikings 9-0 story, you still have the Panthers, you still have the Steelers and the Bengals tied at 8-1, and Houston 7-2 in the ultra competitive division. Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to fall back?
The Bengals and the Browns. Cleveland shocked Cincinnati 35-13 when the 8-1 Bengals took a 23-12 lead against the 0-9 Browns. It looked like business as usual. And then disaster struck as Ken Anderson, fresh off his 447-yard Monday night masterpiece, injured his back and had to leave the game. Mike Phipps had his best game ever, 298 yards, 2 touchdowns. Greg Pruitt ran for 121 yards, and Cleveland got a pick 6 off backup quarterback John Reeves. Cleveland, amidst a schedule from hell, proved that nothing is ever certain in a rivalry game. For Cincinnati, this was a classic donut game. Buffalo last Monday night, Houston next week. Mark, the Browns will not go winless. Will we ever see a winless team in the NFL?
I'm hard pressed to see anybody with who you currently have in 75. You have some bad teams, but these teams are just too much talent on anybody to stand up and lose every single game.
Charles, what do you think happens if Ken Anderson doesn't get hurt? Do the Bengals hold on and win this game?
It's very possible. But Ken Anderson or not, you're supposed to beat the Cleveland Browns. But as Chris Albin said at times, the old donut game, the trap game, and the Bengals fell right in that trap.
Patriots versus the Bills is an AFC East matchup. Buffalo outscores New England 45-31. This was as wild as it gets. Steve Grogan threw for 365 yards. Sam Bam Cunningham ran for 100. Joe Ferguson threw 4 touchdown passes, and the juice was loose as he caught 2 of them, as well as scoring twice on the ground. Pat Summerall had a great line about this one in This Week in Pro Football. In this classic defensive struggle, the score stood 31-all. But the Patriots shot themselves in the foot with 11 penalties and 5 turnovers. In the end, Simpson scored the last 2 touchdowns to salt this one away. The Bills got more good news with Miami's loss to the Colts, which we'll talk about in a minute. If they can win on Thanksgiving at St. Louis, the AFC East is suddenly back in play for Buffalo. Chris, the Bills put themselves back where they want to be. Going forward, how does this look as we'll look at the play here from one of the touchdowns? How are the Bills feeling after the end of this game?
They're feeling a lot better because, unlike last week, they couldn't take advantage of the Miami loss. Well, this week they win this wild game. Miami loses, Cincinnati loses, Houston could lose tomorrow night. Now they do have to play St. Louis on Thanksgiving Day. Yes, the Cardinals used to play on Thanksgiving Day, but if Buffalo can find a way to win, they got New England again, Minnesota. The Bills can still win this. They're not out of it yet. If the Bills were out of it last week, they're back in it this week.
You got to remember, of course, we just had a very controversial touchdown in our last episode between the Rams and Redskins. This one maybe not as controversial, but had replay existed in 1975, I don't think J.D. Hill scored.
It looked like he was
closely.
down.
They dropped the ball at the 1 yard line, and that indicated what they could have been a touchdown.
No, he didn't fumble.
No,
Look at his knee.
His knee was down before he got to the end zone. Watch the knee carefully.
Yep.
First and goal on the 1 yard line.
Yep.
If he doesn't score, OJ.
It's not like this would probably change the outcome of the game. First and goal at the 1. Jim Braxton in the backfield, they probably score. But as a Bills fan in 1975, this would be one of the occasions I'd be thankful there's no replay.
The only thing I can guarantee you is if he's down at the 1, OJ probably has 5 touchdowns in this game.
Moving on to the next game, we got the Broncos and Falcons. Mark, here it is. Your team versus my NFC team. Atlanta douses Denver 35-21. The Broncos scored first on a fumble return touchdown, but got a taste of their own medicine as Atlanta forced 6 turnovers, one of them at pick 6. At 4-6, Denver is once again headed for its 16th non-playoff season in 16 years. The Broncos have never made the playoffs, Mark. What is it going to take to get Denver to January?
I don't know. That's a good question. Right now I'm scratching my head thinking this team's never going to get in. This was the most promising year at one point, and then they fizzled.
Charles,
they had winning seasons the last. They had winning seasons the last 2 years. Denver's been a huge disappointment. They had winning records in 73 and 74.
Charles, this was a battle between 2 teams who've never been in the playoffs. Atlanta comes out on top. Will we ever see an important playoff game involving the Falcons and or Broncos?
Yeah. And believe me, no team's gonna be this bad forever.
One would hope. Moving on to Cardinals, this is a big game in the NFC East, maybe not so much the AFC East. St. Louis jolts gangrene 37-6. Last week, the Cardinals snatched victory from the jaws of defeat while New York got blitzed for 52 points. Both teams held the form today. Terry Metcalf and Mel Gray each scored 2 touchdowns, and I imagine Mel Gray's touchdowns were not controversial, while the Jets had 3 turnovers, including the pick 6. St. Louis's NFC East path gets no easier. Buffalo on Thanksgiving and a massive rematch with Dallas, but both games will be at Busch Stadium. Chris, the Cardinals, are they for real to win the NFC East again in the 1970s?
It should be. Absolutely, because it just feels like, so many people have just taken Dallas, Washington for granted, but it's like St. Louis saying, hey, this isn't just a 2-team division anymore. The NFC East doesn't just revolve around Tom Landry and George Allen. Coryell keeps proving it. They may have gotten a little lucky last week. Mark, you weren't around for that one. But clearly they've proven they are for real. And again, Buffalo, Dallas, both at home.
Moving on, as we got some big game in the NFC East, at least for one of the teams, the Eagles and Cowboys. Dallas runs past Philadelphia 27-17. When Philly almost pulled off a big upset at Veterans Stadium last month, they held the Cowboys to only 78 yards rushing. Today was a different story. 205 yards rushing with 3 different players scoring touchdowns. For the first time since 1965, Dallas will not be playing on Thanksgiving, as instead of a short week, they get 7 days off amidst a stretch of 4 straight divisional games. Mark, when we started this podcast, I picked the Cowboys to represent the NFC in the playoffs. They've looked a little shaky at times, but are they back on track as we're ending November in just a week?
It definitely seems like it. They are. I mean, they seem to be finding ways. This is a veteran squad, and they do know how to put wins together when it matters the most.
Charles, the Cowboys, the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles are just they haven't been a winner in 17 years now. The Cowboys, however, they missed the playoffs in 74. They're fighting for their playoff lives in 75. Where do the Cowboys go for the rest of the season? Do they go into the playoffs, or is it going to be 2 years in a row looking out?
And they continue to play the way they did today against the Eagles. They're gonna be there's still a game back of St. Louis in the ultra competitive NFC East. And again, it depends on what the Redskins do in their game. They're also at least tied for the wild card, given what Detroit does in their game. They're 6-3 coming into this afternoon.
Once upon a time, this was the NFL championship, but today it's two teams playing out the string. The Giants versus the Packers, and Green Bay pummels Big Blue 40-14. These two teams used to be the best in football, and now, they just play. Green Bay had 4 sacks, 5 takeaways, 2 John Hadle touchdowns, and a partridge, and even a safety in a pear tree. The Pack is back, at least versus the NFC East in 1975. Chris, any thoughts on this game?
This was truly one of the games of all time. This was our grandfathers. This was the heavyweight championship of the football world. Now it's essentially
Played in 1958 at Yankee Stadium.
again 61, 62. It's like the Yankees and the Giants by the mid 70s, past their prime.
We move on, Charles, to your team, the 49ers versus the Saints. San Francisco snores past New Orleans 16-6. The first time these teams met, there were 3 return touchdowns. In their first matchup indoors, the big stat was San Francisco's 4 sacks while allowing just 1. The Niners got 2 touchdowns and allowed 0. This was truly one of the games of all times, Charles.
It may be one of those so-called games of all times and a snooze fest, but the Niners will take any when they get it back to 5-5 and feel a little more confident going into 1976.
All right, we got Lions and Chiefs. Kansas City outlasts Detroit 24-21 in overtime. On a day where both teams ran for over 200 yards and the Lions came back from a 10-point fourth quarter deficit, the difference turned out to be a missed Lions extra point. Thus, instead of a 22-21 Detroit triumph, the game went into overtime, and Jan Stenerud broke the hearts of another team. Kansas City under Paul Wiggins once again played up to their level of competition, having already beaten the highly regarded Raiders and Cowboys. For Detroit, this was a brutal loss with games against the Bears and Minnesota on deck, the extra point miss may end up being the one that got away. Mark, Detroit, you never know what to make of these Lions. They're struggling with 2 quarterback injuries, but yet they're in these games and they're sticking around, and then their kicker cost them a chance at a win here in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, missed extra points will come back to haunt you big time. If nothing else, missed field goals are one thing. Missed extra points, that's the biggest sin in football.
And now they got to play the Rams on a short week. Good luck with that.
We got the undefeated Minnesota Vikings and the winless San Diego Chargers. 9-0 Minnesota beats 0-9 San Diego 28-13. We talked about the winless teams earlier with Cleveland, undefeated with Minnesota. However, the worst faced the best and acquitted themselves well as a 21-point underdog thanks to 2 touchdowns by Jesse Freitas and a 2-2 stalemate in turnovers. But the Vikings got 4 sacks and ran the ball better thanks to Chuck Foreman's 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Chargers are now alone as the worst of the worst after Cleveland won, while Minnesota has only 1 home game left amidst tricky road tests on deck at Detroit, at Buffalo, and at RFK at Washington next week. Charles, Vikings, Chargers, what happens first? Do we have a 1-loss Minnesota or a 1 victory San Diego? Because it obviously didn't happen on this day.
It's gonna be a 1-loss one by the Vikings because in the next 3 games, they're next week 3 of the final 4 games they are on the road tricky spot. The Lions, Buffalo, both of them fighting for the playoff lives, and the Redskins next week.
Chris,
Who knows?
Chris, Chuck Foreman doing it on the ground for the Vikings, scoring 3 touchdowns. What were you more impressed with as far as that? Were you no, we don't have that touchdown. Okay. Were you more impressed with Chuck Foreman's performance or with the fact that San Diego kept themselves in the game?
San Diego. I mean, you're used to Chuck Foreman looking good, but the Chargers, a team that I said a week ago couldn't beat a CFL team, played their asses off in bad weather, no less.
All right, we got the Grey Cup, guys. Le Coupe de Grey as Les Alouettes de Montreal versus the Edmonton Eskimos. In the 63rd annual Grey Cup, the Eskimos as edge Les Alouettes 9-8. The 9-8. 9-8. What are we playing? Baseball? The 1975 installment of Canada's Super Bowl was defined by bone-chilling Calgary weather. 15 degrees Celsius and a 25-kilometer-per-hour winds. Hey, Google, how fast is 25 kilometers per hour in miles?
Also playing a hockey game between the Hobby
So
Twins
if
and
you
the
didn't
Edmonton
hear
Oilers.
that, okay, Google, stop. If you didn't hear that, it's 15 miles per hour winds up in Calgary. How brutal was the cold? It plagued the passing and the kicking to a point where it became the first Grey Cup since 1937 with no touchdowns. All the scoring came via the kickers, so I will not be flipping over to show you a touchdown from this game because there were none. A Montreal gamble, oh, that tricky Marv Levy, on 3rd and 3 from the 10 backfired, as instead of taking the points that went for it and came up with snake eyes. And no, not Jake the Snakes. Still, they had a chance to win as a 19-yard field goal with seconds left had them poised for back-to-back Grey Cups. Hey, Google, stop. But trouble with the snap led to an improbable miss. The Eskimos, losers of the previous 2 Grey Cups, came up third time for a charm to end a 15-year championship drought. For Montreal, it was the type of heartbreak their beloved hockey Canadians are used to delivering rather than receiving. Chris, Marv Levy doesn't win the championship. I mean, there are better days ahead for him, right?
He's already got a Grey Cup championship. But I mean, he's not going to lose. I mean, what are the odds that he's going to get beat? He's going to be sunk by another missed kick in the final minute of a neutral site championship game. That's not going to happen.
Charles, can you imagine a baseball World Series being played in that kind of cold and wind?
Wow. That could happen. That's why there's no baseball in Toronto yet. There is a Jerry Park in Montreal.
Mark, I don't know if you were a fan of the Canadian Football League or not, but if you had paid to sit through this game, what would be your first thoughts as you're leaving the stadium?
Get me to the car as quick as possible and get that car started.
I hope you're 1975.
That's. I was gonna say it's one thing to be brutally cold. It's another thing when you add that wind to it.
I hope your 1975 Crown Victoria has a good heater.
Probably not.
Yeah, man.
Bears versus Rams. LA clobber Chicago 38-10. The heavily favored Rams were hell-bent on avoiding a repeat of their pratfall 2 weeks ago versus 2 touchdowns underdog San Francisco. This week, the 19.5-point favorites looked exactly like a 3-touchdown favorites with 5 players combining for 199 rushing yards and 3 of them scoring touchdowns. Amidst the NFC East chaos, LA is in good position to move up to the number 2 seed and perhaps top spot should Minnesota falter amidst their tough road schedule. Mark, the Rams are 9-3. Is that what the record is?
2.
9-2.
8-2.
8-2 after this game. Can they get back in and potentially take away the 1 seed if Minnesota fails?
Yes, I really think they could. I mean, they're playing the best football next to the Vikings. I really think they can, if a slip up, and they can easily get that top spots.
Charles, I thought when the Bears drafted this kid out of Jackson State, this Walter Payton, I thought it was going to turn their fortunes around. What happened?
Growing pains as far as the offense go. In fact, the Bears offense coming in this game, they scored the fewest points of any team in the NFL, fewer than even San Diego and Cleveland. If that's awesome.
I hate to interrupt you guys, but Vinny, apparently the Colts-Dolphins game was not saved when I did the rough draft. So can I just cover that game quickly?
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that, and then we'll do their touchdown from that game.
Okay, so the Dolphins had a 14-2 lead, and they could have basically salted away the division, but then disaster struck. Bob Greasy broke his toe, 5 turnovers, 4 sacks, and then Baltimore basically after the 14-2, they outscored them the rest of the way, 31-2. And now all of a sudden, Miami's lost 2 in a row. The Colts are hot. The Bills may have gotten back on track. They still have to play Buffalo and Baltimore again. And now Greasy's done.
Mark, that's huge. Bob Greasy's done. And here's one of your former Penn State running backs, Lydell Mitchell, with some nice, nifty cut moves on this 26-yard fourth quarter touchdown run for the Colts. Mark?
Yeah, that is some impressive moves. Look, that's what I remember from his days at Penn State.
Vinny, your thoughts on the outcome?
Charles, Bob Greasy breaking his toe. The Dolphin dynasty could be done thanks to a small appendage on a foot.
Wow. And and the Buffalo Bills, if they went on Thursday, there would be a half game back of Miami in the AFC East, and anything is possible.
I know you got
Looks back in it too.
Vinny, I know you got to be ecstatic about this outcome. They've lost 2 in a row.
Being a Bills fan, somebody who in a previous life would have been a Baltimore Colts fan in the NFL, seeing Miami lose to either one of them is great. It's hard with them being in the same division, but yeah, Miami is the antithesis of both of them to me. And if I had been alive in the 70s, it would have been a rough time in that division. Raiders and Redskins. Oakland outlasts Washington 26-23 in overtime. The Raiders' first visit to RFK has seeding and playoff implications aplenty. Despite 5 turnovers and missing an extra point all those kickers this weekend, Oakland controlled the play for 3 quarters thanks to a punishing running game that went for 190 yards. In a reversal of last week when Washington blew a late lead, this time it was the Redskins coming up from behind in the fourth to tie things up. We'll show that touchdown in just a minute. Unlike in St. Louis, the Redskins won the overtime coin toss, but they didn't go anywhere with it. George Blanda, the ageless one who scored a good chunk of his near 2,000 points against Washington with the Bears, atoned for himself for his missed field goal late in regulation with a 27-yard game winner. On a day where Miami and Cincinnati both took stinging losses, Oakland leaped up the AFC totem pole and an easy remaining schedule. Remember, Oakland beat Miami in week 1 and has them poised for the 2 seed. For Washington, it's their second straight crushing overtime loss. As a result, next week versus undefeated Minnesota is basically do or die for the Redskins. Chris, the Raiders, they hold off the Redskins, even though the Redskins get this touchdown, which we're about to see, to send the game to overtime. But the Raiders are able to manage and get the win thanks to George Blanda coming through clutch. George Blanda is about 140 years old at this point. I don't even know what to say for the Redskins. They have had some struggles, and losing 2 straight in a row has their playoff chances on life support.
I think so. Now, they did beat Dallas in overtime at the start of the month, but again, the Mel Gray controversy last week and, Oakland doing what they seemingly always do in the clutch, and now, and, they couldn't even take advantage of Dallas's recent struggles. St. Louis won today. They have to beat Minnesota, because if Washington loses to Minnesota, then basically we might have our 4 playoff teams set before December.
Mark, this is a pretty pass, though, from Bill Kilmer to Frank Grant, and frankly, Frank Grant didn't give a damn about the Raider coverage on this touchdown to put them in overtime.
Yeah, it was a pretty pass, and he could have definitely been covering him a little bit tighter. He seemed like he just gave up and didn't care.
Charles, he beat old man Willie Brown for the Raiders, who's been around since the early days of the AFL with Denver, and gets burnt on this play by Redskin rookie Frank Grant.
And with that play, it puts the Cowboys a game up on both Washington and Detroit for that wild card spot. So we'll see what end of the day Dallas would be in the playoffs.
All right, remember the Heidi game of 1968 when the Raiders game ran so long it conflicted with an NBC movie? This time it was the opposite. Oakland and Washington went long enough where another movie was joined in progress, this time Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. If the complaints of 68 were from football fans, this time it was the kids, and the parents were not amused. So, guys, if you are a fan of YouTube, follow Jaguar Gator 9. Check out this video of the NFL versus Willy Wonka. Chris, who wins the battle of NFL versus the Chocolate Man?
Basically, the Raiders, because it seems like NBC needs to just learn a lesson. Don't schedule a premiere movie when the Raiders are in the late slot game. You're damned if you do, and if you're damned if you don't.
Mark, perhaps NBC should put a buffer show in between their Sunday night movie and the NFL, maybe a post game show or something to give themselves time.
Yeah.
I think that would be a really good idea.
Of course, out on the West Coast, Charles, where you live, the game would be shown in its entirety. The movie would be shown in its entirety anyway, because usually the West Coast goes from live sporting, has other programming in between, so this wouldn't have affected you.
Right. Right. But for the East Coast viewers and Central Time Zone, they're affected.
Moving on to Monday, just real quick, our weekly look at some high school football. This time we're going to go to Ohio as Cary wins the state title in overtime duel. That's some basketball. Woody Hayes denies plans for retiring, Chris. He's not stepping down. Are you surprised?
Yes, because the rumblings have been if Woody wins that Rose Bowl, he may want. Does he go out as a national champion? Because a lot of people think Woody may want to go out a champion. He wants that heroic exit.
Mark, you guys have a coach in Penn State, and Joe Paterno has been there for a few years. Would you be nervous as a fan if Joe Paterno was in this position where he's possibly talking retirement toward the end of a successful season?
Yeah, I would be, especially I'd be like, especially considering the Paterno's a lot younger than Woody Hayes. I'd be wondering if he's talking about retirement, what's he thinking of? Where's he thinking of going? He's built Penn State up to a powerhouse the last several years.
And by the way, Mark, just to look in the future, Mark, I thought after 2005, I honestly, Joe Pa was going to honestly go out in a blaze of glory after that triple overtime Orange Bowl against Florida State. I thought that would have been a possible time to go out on top.
Yeah, that would have been a great time for him to have gone out.
We got some more Ohio news as the Bucks clinched their fourth Rose Bowl. They're also eyeing the national title. We're talking about NFL quarterbacks we've been talking about all season long. Now Ken Anderson joins the list. Looking down on the bottom, let's see, New England or NI football. That is northern Illinois. Jerry Ippolito. It's kind of blurry, but he is 38 years old, a graduate of Miami, Ohio, the football coaching factory, and he's left the job.
He's resigned.
In Illinois. Huh?
He is resigned, and I guess you could say he'll no longer be leading the Huskies.
All right, so America's reporting on the Grey Cup. Here's how America covered it. This little blurb: Calgary Alta, UPI. David Cutler booted a 52-yard field goal on the final play of the third quarter Sunday, giving the Edmonton Eskimos a 9-8 victory over Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League's Grey Cup.
Wow, no mention of the 19-year. Wow, no mention of the fourth quarter miss.
It's kind of an afterthought down in America, and that's the way. 50 years later, it's not much different. Even that the brief years where Canada came down to America, they didn't get a lot of coverage. Every now and then, especially if they have a big name player up there, ESPN will cover it. But here's the big injury news for the Miami Dolphins. Bob Greasy might be sidelined for the season. Mark, we've talked about this before with the quarterbacks. Ken Anderson and Bob Greasy joined the list of injured quarterbacks. What is the NFL going to do about this one?
I don't know. I don't know that there's much they can do. It's unfortunate. They're both young. They'll both recover, but it is what it is. Unfortunately.
Let's take a look at our teams right now in 1975 and think about what happens to them if the quarterback goes down. Mark, we'll start with you with Denver. Who's the quarterback in Denver right now? Is it Charlie Johnson still?
It's Steve Ramsey.
Steve Ramsey. Okay.
So Denver's not really in the playoff chase. So an injury to Steve Ramsey, you might find something in your backups that you don't know about. So that one, maybe not a great example. But Charles, we go to you. The 49ers have been in and out of the divisional lead, and Norm Snead, he's an old, well-traveled quarterback. Again, it's kind of surprising he hasn't joined the injury list considering his age and whatnot, but that would definitely be a crushing blow. As is Steve Spurrier still even on the roster with San Francisco?
Yes, he actually led the Rams' comeback win.
All right, so Charles,
Wait, well,
it might be more beneficial to you then. The big one would be for us in Buffalo. If Joe Ferguson goes down, or in Baltimore, if Burt Jones has to take some significant time out, that would be devastating to teams who are fighting for playoff lives, although Miami losing Bob Greasy, maybe not so much if all three of them went down.
By the way, Baltimore does have Marty Dombres, who has have some semblance of experience from a few years ago.
All right, we have another obituary to read. November 24th, 1975. Tony Latone, a back for the Pottsville Maroons from 1925 to 28, and the Providence Steamroller in 1930. Anthony J. Tony Latone, a member of the famed Pottsville Maroons football team of the 1920s, died Monday at his home in Detroit, Michigan. He was a fullback and linebacker on the Maroons team, which won the World's Championship in 1925. Although not recognized by the NFL, he was 78 years old. So, interesting to note that his obituary here not only mentions that he played football, as a lot of them don't, but also mentions that Pottsville was the champion. They're the uncrowned champion, as the Chicago Cardinals, whether you want to agree with them or not, are the NFL champions in 1925. Moving on, we got the Monday night battle between the Steelers and the Oilers. Pittsburgh drills Houston 32-9. The Oilers came into their first Monday night game in 3 years riding the wave of their massive win over Miami, but they soon found out that Pittsburgh is a different animal. The Steel Curtain forced five turnovers and recorded a safety, while Franco Harris's Italian Army ran for 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. Having swept Houston in a combination with Cincinnati's shocking loss at Cleveland, suddenly the AFC Central is opened up for Pittsburgh. With every passing week, the Steelers look invincible. It makes what O.J. Simpson did to them, Chris, in week 2 look even more incredible in retrospect.
Yeah, because think about it. None of these other odds have even come close. And, Buffalo's the only team that's gotten to Pittsburgh.
Here's a look at that. One of Franco Harris's runs, this one being a 4-yard run that put the Steelers up 9-3, and they never looked back, winning 32-9. Just it wasn't even touched till the very end. Charles, Pittsburgh, are they gonna repeat now that the AFC Central seems wide open for them?
It's very possible for the Steelers haven't skipped a beat.
Swept Houston, and I guess if some thought Pittsburgh might be a little fat and happy, they're not.
Mark, what do you think that the fans in Pennsylvania, especially the western half of Pennsylvania, are thinking right now as we head into November or December, and Pittsburgh is in control of their own destiny?
Right. Yeah, I think they're thinking that as long as they stay healthy, they're the team to beat. Not Oakland, not Minnesota, not anybody. I think they feel we can take care of anybody in the AFC, and we'll take care of business as usual in the Super Bowl. Is what they're thinking right now.
Okay, let's take a look at the cover of Sports Illustrated for November 24th, 1975. It's a runner's game, and the pros like Cal's Chuck Muncie. Guys, where does Chuck Muncie go in the draft?
I know Archie Griffin's getting all the publicity, and there's Ricky Bell, but I think I could see Muncie. He could maybe go to the Seahawks. Everyone's talking about where's Ricky Bell going to go. Well, if Ricky Bell were to, let's say, go to the Buccaneers, I think Seattle may want. You think Seattle should take a flyer on Muncie?
Maybe.
Well, the question would. Well, he's very capable, and don't forget, he's got Wesley Walker. And by the way, they've still got a shot at Pasadena. Remember, if UCLA loses to USC, then
Speaking of Cal Muncie, the Cal Bears, who are 6-1 after beating Stanford in the big game, 48-15 on Saturday. And as far as Muncie goes, he ran 169 yards, had a couple of touchdowns.
And remember, Charles, Cal's the only team to beat San Jose State thus far.
Yeah.
Only a few points.
Moving on up, we got a new cover photo after that Redskins and Raiders game. This is
That's
Hendricks.
Ted Hendricks, the Mad
Ted Hendricks.
Stork.
Oh yeah, I should have looked at numbers to try and read the name. I'm not sure who the Washington back is, but that's Hendricks' big, massive frame clobbering him.
Mark, do you remember that guy, Ted Hendricks, from the early mid '80s?
Yes, I do remember him quite well. And,
So
and he had a couple big game against the Steelers too.
We move on to Tuesday, November 25th, and Lou Saban ends the controversy in Buffalo. What controversy is that we're talking about? Well, Bills owner Ralph Wilson and his coach have apparently kissed and made up, and all the rumors surrounding Saban's imminent resignation have died out. That's good news for Buffalo, obviously, as Saban has returned the Bills to legitimacy after his brief venture to Denver and other places. But it seems like we're back on the same page with Wilson and Saban.
Hey, by the way, baseball headline at the bottom.
Gene Morgan, new manager for the Twins. Morgan, of course, having managed the Philadelphia Phillies and the first 6.5 years of the Expos history in Montreal.
And we have Syracuse linebacker Ray Preston has joined 3 major candidates for the Heisman Trophy. They head to the 15th annual Kodak All-American Game. So here are your finalists. Running backs Tony Dorsett of Pitt, Ricky Bell of Southern Cal, and Archie Griffin of Ohio State, who are expected to battle for the Heisman Trophy, given the nation's Player of the Year, and won by Griffin last year, head the 12-man offensive team.
Oh, this is the Kodak
team, yeah. Oh, okay.
No Chuck Muncie. Go figure.
Yep.
That's shocking.
Are you surprised Muncie's out of it? Because, I guess that losing streak didn't hurt Ricky Bella. I'm kind of surprised that Muncie's not. Remember, USC's lost 3 in a row.
John Muncie was still on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Naturally, when you're on the cover of that storyline, you should get some consideration for the Heisman Trophy. That's not necessarily the case.
Back to the story.
What do you think?
Griffin, the only repeater from the 1974 Kodak team, and UCLA quarterback John Sierra were the only seniors named to the 5-man backfield. Bell and Dorsett are both juniors, and fullback Earl Campbell of Texas is the first sophomore chosen since 1969 when Carlos Alvarez of Florida was chosen. The rest of the offense is made up of seniors except for junior tackle Marvin Powell of USC, who at 6'5", 268 pounds is the biggest player on the 24-man squad. Henry Marshall is 6'3", 208-pounder who helped Missouri upset Alabama on the season opener, and Steve Rivers of the University of California was brilliant in the Bears' victory over USC, were chosen at end. Texas's Bob Simmons at 6'5", 245 pounds. Senior joins Powell at tackle. Selected at guard were Dennis Lick, 6'4", 245-pound senior, joins Wisconsin senior, and Randy Johnson is 6'2", 250-pound Georgia senior. And Nebraska's Rick Bonas was selected at center. What are your thoughts on that offense for the All Kodak team?
Wow, no respect for Chuck Muncie. I mean, seriously, I know you got a lot of running backs, but I know there's a lot of, but still, I just can't believe Muncie got snubbed. By the way, you'll note the irony of a Randy Johnson, Vinny. I guess you could call him a big unit.
Preston, we look at the defense. Preston, a 6', 215-pound senior from Lawrence, Massachusetts, played much of the season with various injuries, including a broken wrist. However, he helped lead the Orangemen to their best season in years. Joining Preston at linebacker are Dartmouth's Reggie Williams, a 6'1", 215-pound senior, Texas A&M senior Ed Simmons, and a 6', 215-pound senior who comes from Las Vegas. The brother combination heads up the defensive line, Oklahoma's Leroy and Dewey Selman. Leroy, 6'2", 226-pound tackle, and his brother Dewey, a 6'1", 257-pound end, were chosen to the line that also includes Alabama and Leroy Cook, and a 6'3", 205-pound senior, and Notre Dame. Guys, that is my Beagle Cookie trying to get his words in on this defense. The two Selman are the third members of the Selman family to be chosen to the Kodak team. Luscious Selman was chosen in 1974, and he now plays in the Canadian Football League. The five-member defensive backfield, Navy's Chet Mueller, Michigan's Don Dufek, Arizona State's Mike Haynes, and Ohio State's Tim, Foles? Texas A&M's Pat Thomas. With so many fine players to choose from, we're sure the coaches had a difficult time deciding who got the honors, said Dick Bartlett, director of Kodak's Presentation and Promotions Department. Your thoughts on the old
Again,
Kodak team?
I mean, look at some of those couple of names on the defensive name that you guys might remember. Reggie Williams, Bengals, Mike Haynes, Patriots, Pat Thomas, Rams, and Leroy Selman, Tampa Bay.
All right, we've
Fun
got
fact, Vinny.
What's that?
Fun fact, Vinny. Reggie Williams will actually play long enough that he was on both Bengals Super Bowl teams with the '80s.
We got some Raiders injury news. Fullback Marv Hubbard of the Oakland Raiders, who suffered his second shoulder separation of the season against Washington, is expected to miss 3 weeks. That was the estimate made yesterday after the Raiders returned home. Pete Banaszak, who ran for 3 touchdowns Sunday to give the Raiders a career record of 32, played the entire second half at fullback and will carry the most of the load with Hubbard out. Clam Daniels held the old Oakland record for touchdowns, rushing at 30, and Banaszak said Sunday it's flattering to hold the record because Clem is one of the 5 greatest backs who ever played ball. I'm not the ball player he was. Banaszak's 11 touchdowns on runs this season also is a club record. So the Raiders, Charles, are expected to not miss any beats, losing Marv Hubbard.
Thanks. The Raiders still a pretty good ball club. As long as they got Ken Stabler running the ship as far as the Raiders offense goes. Not to mention a pretty good defense, a good offensive line, and of course John Madden, one of the great coaches in football right now. Right up there with Chuck Noll, the Steelers.
And you could do a lot worse than Pete Banaszak as your backup.
Yep.
Mark, we got an award for Penn State. Penn State, which finished its regular season with a 9-2 record, won the Lambert Trophy yesterday for the 5th year in a row and the 12th time since the award was instituted in 1936. What is the Lambert Trophy, you ask? It's given annually for the outstanding performance by an Eastern major college football team. The Nittany Lions, who will play Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, defeated Pitt Saturday 7-6. They received 5.5 of the 7 first-place votes and 68.5 points to 57.5 points for the Sunbound Pitt Panthers, which finished 7-4. Harvard, Ivy League champions, 10-7, winners over Yale, received votes, as well as the Crimson. That is the Crimson. Received 57 points, good for third place. Good award winner, Mark.
I think so. They are the epitome of Eastern football. There isn't, not going to say for the South, but I up north definitely they are the best team in the East as far as I'm concerned.
And no truth to the rumor, if Penn State won the Lambert Trophy, the question though is, did Jack Lambert present the Lambert Trophy?
With a couple games left after Thanksgiving, here is the top 20 as we Charles, your San Jose still on the top 20. They're down on the bottom, but they're still in it.
9-1, and of course Chuck Muncie and the Bears 8-3, 11th ranked overall.
And again, that 8-3 Cal team is there. Remember, 8-3 Cal, the Spartans' only loss, and that was with 2 minutes. So San Jose State is really only like 5 minutes away from being 10-0.
What I find great about this whole thing is that the Georgia Bulldogs are so great. They received the 15th place vote twice, once with 110 points and once with 101 points, as they're ahead of Miami Ohio 16th.
Vince Dooley's doing that good a job.
Yeah, Ohio State's still number 1. Texas A&M number 2. We haven't talked about them much, but they play a big game against Texas this week. It's 2 versus 5. Oklahoma's 3 and Alabama's 4 to round out the top 5.
And hasn't lost since the opener.
Oops. Moving on, college and NFL news. Here, Tarkenton is not among the casualties. That's a good thing, as he is healthy going in for the undefeated Vikings. And what is this one? Bill Battle, job security not his worry, as he may be fired soon as Tennessee's head football coach. But he says, maybe I ought to be worrying about it, but I'm not. I've been just about doing the best job I can coaching football right now. I've got Vanderbilt to worry about. Does Tennessee have a reason to fire Bill Battle, and where do they go from there if they do? Mark.
I don't know that they have a reason necessarily to fire him. That, that's a tough call.
Some other news here: the University of South Carolina has accepted an invitation to face the Miami Redskins of Ohio in the Tangerine Bowl. Ohio State's Ray Griffin, brother of 1974 Heisman Trophy winner Archie Griffin, has been named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. University of Cincinnati extended the contract to football coach Tony Mason for 4 more years, and Kansas Athletic Director Clyde Walker announced Coach Bud Moore is receiving a new 5-year contract. And some pro football news for you, Mark. Tom Walker, a free agent who played the last 2 seasons with Jacksonville, has signed to play with the Denver Broncos next season, but not this season. Charles, some baseball news over here. The New York Mets of the National League have announced the signing of 1976 contracts by Joe Torre. I wonder who that guy is. Rick Baldwin, Skip Lockwood, and Ken Sanders.
He's 35 years old. He's got and he totally took a maximum 20% pay cut to $101,000.
Former MVP.
Yep, 71.
I wonder if Joe Torre will ever amount to anything in baseball.
Hey, he's a former National League MVP, so he's done something.
All right, now it's time to look at the NFL standings on this November 25th, Tuesday. Looking at the AFC, first, Pittsburgh is in first place. They are your number 1 seed right now. Oakland has jumped into the number 2 seed. Miami still the 3 seed, but right now your wild card team is Cincinnati. They can't go play Pittsburgh, so Cincinnati would play Oakland, and Miami would have to travel to Pittsburgh in the AFC. Mark, your thoughts on the AFC right now after 10 weeks.
I think it's the only question I have coming out is who's going to win the AFC East. Oakland's going to win that division, I think, fairly easily. Pittsburgh and Cincy, it's going to come down to one of those two, and the AFC East is still up for grabs. And even if Miami somehow pulls it out, they're banged up, they're injured. I don't know if they're going to make a playoff push this year.
Chris, Baltimore and Buffalo, they're 2 games back on the wild card, but only a game back in the division. What route is more likely for them in the last 4 weeks?
Well, Baltimore and Buffalo both play Miami, but the difference is the Bills already lost to Miami in October. The Colts just beat Miami, and they get them ahead at home. So Baltimore can theoretically sweep, whereas the best the Bills can do is a split, and that's extremely critical.
Charles, looking at the NFC right now, Minnesota's your 1 seed. St. Louis and Los Angeles are both 8-2, battling for that 2 and 3 seed, while Dallas is currently your 4 seed. Now, again, Dallas can't play St. Louis, but they would go to Minnesota, and the Rams and Cardinals would play each other depending on who gets the home field. At this point, Washington and Detroit still there at 6-4. San Francisco, 2 games out of the wild card at 5-5. There's 4 games to go. Your thoughts?
And there's a battle for the playoffs. Just to have a good final 4 games and see where the chips may fall. We want to get a good play some good football down the stretch and feel confident going into next year.
By the way, Cardinals are the 2 seed because both teams have lost to Dallas, but I think St. Louis would get the 2 seed because the Cardinals' only other loss was to Washington. The Niners was to the Rams, so I think the Cardinals have the quote-unquote better loss.
We already mentioned the free agent signing of Tom Walker. We've looked at the Monday night game, but here's a little news from Division 2. On Saturday, November 29th, Western Kentucky at Northern Iowa, New Hampshire at Lehigh, Northern Michigan at Boise State, Livingston University of Alabama will be at North Dakota. That's your Division 2 playoffs. I don't know if we'll get back to it again because that's something, we don't focus on the smaller colleges, but when we do get news, we try to report them.
By the way, Rams actually are the 2 seed because they have a better division record than St. Louis.
All right, it's now time for Thanksgiving Day, November 26th. We're on Thursday, right? November 26th?
No, it's still Wednesday.
It's Wednesday, okay. Reeves is like a Broadway understudy. Now, who is Reeves, and who are we talking about? We are talking about Cincinnati quarterback John Reeves. He knows how the Maytag repairman in those... There we go. Maytag repairman in those commercials feels. John, the backup quarterback, who was one of the loneliest jobs in pro football. but when he trots on the field, he's like a Broadway understudy. The playgoers came to see the star, but when the injury or illness sidelines number one quarterback Ken Anderson, John has to be ready to go. Charles, the backup quarterback in the NFL, could be the most loved person on the team, but he could come in and turn out to be the biggest goat of all. And I don't mean greatest of all time.
Yeah, so say the star quarterback, the key quarterback goes down, you have to come in and you botch up a few plays here, you're going to end up being labeled a GOAT. Thankless job of sorts. If you're the backup quarterback, you get a lot. You don't get a lot of playing time, you get a lot less money and a lot less respect. But for John Reed, probably the only alternative would be selling women's shoes, so he'll take it.
And here's the scary part for Reeves. If his first start potentially is against the Oilers, I mean, he's not exactly facing the Browns. He's got to face the Houston Oilers next week.
Yes.
Not exactly an easy task.
On this Wednesday, Ken Anderson's status is still questionable, so that's why we're trying to learn to see who is the backup quarterback for these Cincinnati Bengals, because he might be getting more playing time than you want to see. If you're
Mark, Mark, would you say that's a pretty brutal possibility? The backup quarterback has to start against the 7-3 Oilers in a game that might knock Cincy out.
Yeah, that's about as brutal as it's going to get if that happens.
Other news from around Houston's the only game we can look ahead to. Observed Bengals defensive tackle Ron Carpenter when talking about the playoffs started. They're going to come in here with an attitude that they've got to win, and we'll have that same attitude. We're going to have it if we're going to make the playoffs. Now, Isaac Curtis received the highest commendations from his boss Paul Brown for playing with a still tender ankle and doing a tremendous job, and rookie running back Stan Fritz returned to his Oak Ridge, Tennessee home on Monday. He was called home because his mother underwent surgery, explained Brown. He'll probably be back tomorrow. News from the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, just in case you're joining us, I randomly pick a newspaper every day to look at, so sometimes we get news from Ohio, Florida, Miami. It just depends on what I come up with. Speaking of Ohio and high school football, Ben Hubbard is given an honor. His Colleran High School team won the Hamilton County League's American Division Championship this year in his second season with the Cardinals, and he's been named Division Coach of the Year. Looking at these three senior elder linemen who play their final game tomorrow, traditional Thanksgiving Day game against Western Hills. From left to right are Mark Weber, Ken Bulger, and tackle Joe Overbeck. Down in Oxford, Ohio, that's the University of Ohio Bobcats, Randy Walker. He's been named the MVP of Miami, so why is it coming out of Oxford? Oh, Miami plays in Oxford. No, Miami plays in Miami. I'm confused why it's coming out of Oxford. But anyway, Randy Walker's named the Redskins MVP. Close. There you go. Moving on. All right, we have an advertisement for Thanksgiving. 3 p.m. Buffalo Bills versus St. Louis Cardinals. It's special on TV5. Top-notch NFL football action as O.J. Simpson meets Terry Metcalf, preceded by Grandstand. I love how these they advertise football and try to get you tuned in like O.J. Simpson and Terry Metcalf are actually going to do battle on a field.
Are you surprised they mentioned Metcalf instead of Jim Hart or Mel Gray?
It's tough with the Cardinals because who really is the star? I mean, there's no question of who the Bills are going to, be their featured player. Even if OJ only runs for 15 yards and Joe Ferguson throws 4 touchdowns, OJ's still the main attraction. But when it comes to St. Louis, it's a toss-up whether it's your quarterback or your receiver or running back. I mean, they've got a threesome that, they're unsung heroes. We have
By the way, how about Dallas? By the way, how about Dallas not playing on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, that's a shocker. You expect them to play even back then.
Charles, let's take a look at what's on CBS on Thanksgiving for WCPO TV.
You'll notice no match game, no Price is Right, no Telltales, none of the games showed. Instead, you got the Hollywood Parade at 10 o'clock. Then you got the Rams and Lions at noon. Then was classic tales, cartoons at 3:30. But you still got Let's Make a Deal at 7:30, and then what's the special at the Waltons at 8 o'clock. John Boy and crew.
First Thanksgiving game indoors, by the way.
Our Love is here to stay at 10 p.m. on CBS WCPO TV. That's out of Ohio.
In Cincinnati.
NFL transactions. The Chicago Bears running back Johnny Musso and defensive tackle Ron Rydalch were added to the roster. Both came from the now defunct World Football League. Again, more players being added, but not the big names. New York Giants offensive guard Dick Enderle is placed on waivers, and defensive tackle Bill Windauer signed as a free agent. Again, no word on the big names coming out of the World Football League. November 27th. It is now Thanksgiving morning. If you're on NBC, you're watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, you're getting ready for football. And the St. Louis Cardinals, who play later, have signed veteran running back John Ashton as a free agent and have placed on injured reserve running back Eddie Moss. So there's no moss growing in St. Louis as they're making moves, Chris.
Well, basically, Ashton is the injury replacement for Moss because obviously, with Metcalf and Otis, you're obviously not going to replace them. It's just depth.
Time for the games. It's Thanksgiving. The NFL, they're two classic games. Detroit has been on Thanksgiving since 1934. It's no different in 1975 as LA blanks Detroit 20-0. The Lions' first Thanksgiving Day game indoors was a disaster as blowing a winnable game at Kansas City carried over amidst their short week. James Harris threw 3 touchdowns. Detroit had 10 penalties and Mark. LA clinches the NFC West.
Yeah, not a big shock with the Rams clinching the West. There wasn't anybody in that division to really challenge them, and they're just playing lights out.
We mentioned that James Harris threw 3 touchdowns. This one, a 38-yarder to Harold Jackson, is a perfect pass and the game clincher, and the NFC West clincher at that, Charles.
Wow. Congratulations to the Los Angeles Rams, the champions of the NFC West.
Brutal. Sure, think about that turnaround for Detroit. They missed the extra point, and just like that, they've been knocked a peg back.
Chris, humiliating. Look closely at the end of this match. Just something I find funny. Watch the ball as Harold Jackson after he secures it. It's the opposite of a spike. It's a kick.
Oh, in other words, that's the thing that I've seen guys do when they drop the ball. That's what the difference is. At least Harold Jackson waits until he's in the end zone.
Yeah. All right, Chris. This is our Bills. They're circling the wagons against St. Louis, 32-14. In the first Thanksgiving Day since 1965, not to feature Dallas, Buffalo's shaky defense allowed the game's first and last points by Terry Metcalf touchdowns. But in between, the Bills did everything right. They forced 7 turnovers, ran for 164 yards, and even saw Jim Braxton do an O.J. Simpson impression with 193 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Combined with Miami's recent 2-game skid and Bob Greasy's season-ending toe injury, Buffalo, just like that, is right back in the AFC East. St. Louis, meanwhile, now is facing a monster game next week against Dallas, which, for all intents and purposes, will decide the NFC East. Chris, your thoughts?
Think about it. If I told you Terry Metcalf would score the first and last points of the game, you'd feel a little nervous. But 7 turnovers? A lot is said about the Bills' defense, but one thing they do well is take the ball away. And St. Louis, how do you go from looking that good to that bad? They scored first, but you think, and I think somewhere Dallas is wondering, we got taken off Thanksgiving for that?
Mark, what are your thoughts on Dallas not playing on Thanksgiving as we watch this Jim Braxton touchdown as he scored 3 on this day?
It doesn't seem right. I've known Dallas to play on Thanksgiving Day for a while. They should be playing on Thanksgiving Day. It should be down there in RFK in Dallas.
Not sure.
By the way, Vinny,
which touchdown this is Braxton had 3, 2 of them for 1 yard. And Charles, this one, whether it's the first or third, Jim Braxton, an impressive day. If CBS, was this on CBS? No, this one is
NBC.
On NBC. If NBC is handing out Phil Simms Iron Award or John Madden's Turducken, who gets this? Is Jim Braxton getting a turkey leg on this day?
3 touchdowns? Yeah.
And by the way, Vinny, the Bills will next Thanksgiving Day will come in 2019. So we weren't allowed to see that one.
1994.
Oh, but we will. But make no mistake, Vinny, we will one day see Bills Thanksgiving Day wins.
Well, that's not the only two games being played on Thanksgiving, as Georgia and Georgia Tech. The Bulldogs and the Ramblin' Wreck, as the Bulldogs mauled the Yellow Jackets 42-26. Last year, Georgia lost by 20 to Tech. Between the hedges, this year's installment of clean, old-fashioned hate between the 8-2 and 7-3 teams turned out to be as lopsided as that day's NFL Thanksgiving games. Georgia set the tone with an interception on the game's first play, scored 21 points in the second quarter, and led 42-0 after three, until maximum garbage time scores took place. Georgia is riding high going into their Cotton Bowl battle. Only question is who will be the Junkyard Dogs Southwestern Conference opponent on New Year's Day. Mark, I know you're a Penn State fan, probably don't follow the South as much, but Georgia's demolition of Georgia Tech, how impressive is that for the Dogs?
It's very impressive. I don't follow the South that much, but I you expect to be a little bit closer of a game, and Georgia just showed their superiority on this day.
I don't know how I would have been able to follow the Bulldogs back in 1975 if I had been alive, but you guys know I am a massive Georgia fan, and I got one thing to say about this. There's nothing finer in the land than a drunk, obnoxious Bulldog fan. The Georgia Bulldogs demolishing Georgia Tech, whether it's in 1975 or 2025, gets me excited. Go Dogs.
Dogs.
All
Yeah.
right, well, Chris, we got some snow in the forecast as the Bills fight has been delayed. The Buffalo Bills of the National Football League en route to St. Louis for a match today against the Cardinals were forced to spend last night in Chicago because of snow in St. Louis. The Bills' flight from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport to St. Louis was canceled after Lambert International Airport was declared closed because of snow. How about that? Snow in St. Louis disrupts the Bills' travel plans.
And that disrupted their flight to St. Louis, which makes it all the more impressive that they got into St. Louis on a sexually short time and they still blew them out. How badly would they have beaten the Cardinals if they actually got there on time?
That's a good question. Maybe O.J. Simpson would have gotten a turkey leg. But by the way, guys, we are now on Black Friday. It's November 28th with the newspaper articles. And let's take a look at the NFL teams have clinched playoff berths. Two NFL berths have been clinched. They are the Los Angeles Rams of the National Football Conference and the Minnesota Vikings, with that Rams victory over Detroit, gave them the NFC Central. Charles, two of the divisions are wrapped up. The NFC East is still in question. The wild card is still out there. Rams and Vikings. Is this our NFC Championship game?
Yeah.
And remember, no more rotations. Now the Rams and Vikings have home games and seats to play for. It's no longer a rotation. The Rams have to finish ahead of Minnesota or vice versa.
So that could be important, especially for a team like Los Angeles if they have to travel up to Bloomington to battle the Vikings, as the Vikings are still undefeated. Well, the San Diego Chargers might be winless, but they're not done making moves, as they have acquired tight end Chuck Bradley from the Southern California Sun of the now defunct World Football League. They release reserve right end Craig Cotton, and they've also waived linebacker Ken Hutcherson. San Diego making moves. Well, we got a big game on Black Friday. It's Texas versus Texas A&M. We know the Aggies are number 2 and the Longhorns are number 5. This game can't get any bigger, especially for the potential Cotton Bowl matchup with Georgia. This was the main course of Black Friday. Number 2 versus number 5. The one that is ranked first in the scoring and another that is first in defense. It had bowl stakes. A Texas win sends them back to the Cotton Bowl. An Aggie wins either them or Arkansas goes to Dallas. In a battle of offense versus defense, the former won as Texas's only touchdown came on a punt return by Raymond Claiborne. The Longhorns shot themselves in the foot with 8 penalties and 3 interceptions. It marked the Aggies' first win over Texas since 1967, their 5th period dating back to 1940, and put them one step closer to a possible split national title with Ohio State and Oklahoma falter on New Year's Day. Charles, the Cotton Bowl, Texas A&M, Texas get this win. Are they going to sneak into the Cotton Bowl, or is Arkansas possibly going there?
That's going to depend on what Arkansas does tomorrow.
No, next week. They play next week, actually. A&M plays Arkansas on Saturday, December 6th. That's for the Cotton Bowl. Basically, Vinny, you got to wait a week to see who the Junkyard Dogs play.
Right.
This punt return touchdown, 64 yards by Raymond Claiborne of the Texas Longhorns, is a thing of beauty, and it starts off with a fumble watch as Claiborne is unable to handle the ball right off the bat.
By the way, Mark, that Raymond Claiborne, you guys, Vinny, Mark, you remember Raymond Claiborne from the Patriots.
Yep.
And of course, I've told the story before of my one of my roommates from college who was from Brownwood, Texas. Big Texas A&M fan. Also, weirdly, a big Philadelphia Eagle fan.
That is something shocking. Usually, when you can't handle a fumble, the play results in disaster. He picked it up like it was no big deal and just ran it down the sideline untouched.
Oh, by the way, Mark, since you weren't here for last week's podcast, Vinny, tell Mark that story about that Eagles-Cowboys game that you remember with your roommate.
So on Monday Night Football in 1997, the Eagles blew a chance to beat the Cowboys on Monday night with a field goal botch, and our dorms were locked with 1,000-pound magnets. And Tex was so upset about that. Now he hates the Cowboys, even though he's from Texas. He ripped open the door.
Oh wow!
And he's also
and they were still locked with magnets, and he still got the door open.
Yep. And he's also a big Texas A&M fan, so luckily he wasn't alive in '75. But I wouldn't want to have been around him on that Raymond Claiborne punt return. That's for sure.
Yeah, neither would I. You got that right.
The gentle giant, really, though. He was a great roommate. All right, moving on.
It was just such a wild story, Vinny, when you told me that back in our '97 stuff.
USC versus UCLA. Number 14, UCLA beats USC 25-22. Once again, the Battle of LA had Rose Bowl implications, but the Trojans, thanks to 3 straight losses, were reduced to role of spoiler. A Bruins loss would have sent the University of Cal Berkeley to Pasadena. UCLA damn near handed the Golden Bears that Rose Bowl ticket with a staggering 8 lost fumbles and allowing 136 yards to Ricky Bell. The Trojans, unlike most previous years, could not take advantage. They allowed only 3 completed passes, but 2 of them went for touchdowns. A team that tied 2 8-1 Air Force in is Rose Bowl bound for the first time since January of '67 gets a shot at revenge against Ohio State. The Trojans, in a most astounding turn of fate, went from the number 3 in the nation at the end of October to winless November. John McKay's announcement that he was leaving for the expansion Buccaneers seemingly made SC no longer favor their offensive execution. Chris, John McKay, did he doom the Trojans by taking the Buccaneers job?
So freaking lootly. Yeah. I mean, here's a guy that had made Rose Bowl after Rose Bowl, always great down the stretch, and now they suddenly can't win a game in November? That's not a coincidence, guys.
And John McKay until after the season ends.
And by the way, how about UCLA? They lose 8 fumbles, they complete 3 passes, and they win.
Mark, we're not going to get to see Ricky Bell in the Rose Bowl. How is that? I mean, what does that do for the television audience? Who's on UCLA? What are the notable names?
Wendell Tyler's on the Bruins.
Okay, I don't think he's Ricky
Bell.
Okay,
I do know that name.
And their head coach is a name you might be familiar with, Dick Vermeil.
Yeah, I know that. I know that. I've heard of that name from somewhere too. It's. I'd rather see Ricky Bell, but they got some other guys that can fill in the gaps.
USC's been in a million Rose Bowls. Let someone else have the fun for once.
It's Saturday morning, and let's head to upstate New York as Charlie Young says the Bills are alive and well. We've, of course, talked about that after their victory over St. Louis. But here is a cartoon for the Detroit Lions. Now, they play indoors, so this isn't talking about their own home weather. It's talking about their play versus the Rams on Thanksgiving Day.
Basically, it's like when they missed that extra point on Sunday, that basically ruined any chance they had. They played so badly indoors, they may want to go back to playing outside.
Larry Felser, who is the Bills beat writer, a together defensive thing, can push Bills' playoff swing. And, of course, Earl Morrall taking over for the Dolphins. The big game, Buffalo and Miami's coming up. Chris, what are your thoughts? Do we end this losing streak or what?
If they can't do it now, they're never going to do it. They've gotten their mojo back. Miami doesn't have the aura. They don't have the guys they had. Did Miami use up all their luck to beat Buffalo the first time? They have lost at the Orange Bowl. They don't have that aura about them. If the Bills can't get them this year, then I don't know when they can.
Reviewing Army and Navy. Army and Navy will be epic as always. Hope springs eternal. Army's football players wear Beat Navy signs on their helmets as they race through a final workout for today's classic meeting with Navy in Philadelphia. Army, winner of the only 2 games this season, have been beaten by the Middies 51-0 and 19-0 in their last 2 meetings. Regardless of the records, Mark, what does Army Navy mean, especially in the Pennsylvania region of Philadelphia?
It's big time, especially in that neck of the woods. I don't know how big it is over on the western side of the state where I live, but over there, it's that's yeah, it's big. It goes back Philadelphia back to the Revolutionary War, where the army was founded with the founding fathers. It's big time covered every year over there.
By the way, who do you root for in the Army Navy game? I root for the Army because a couple of my high school friends served in the Army.
I changed the Navy because the Navy for me because my father served in the Navy, my uncle Les served in the Navy, and my grandma was a baker in the Navy.
See, my dad did some time in the army, and my grandfather in World War II did time in the Navy. It's to me, it's a toss up. I just look and hope it's a good game.
My dad was a Marine. My father-in-law was a Marine. Of course, the Marines are a branch, founded from the Navy. I had cousins who were in the Army, but the big thing for me is one of my high school teammates played for Army in the late '90s and early 2000s, and so I always pick Army because I obviously didn't serve in either branch. But all right, here's another big game: Alabama versus Auburn, the Iron Bowl. Number 4 Bama blanks Auburn 28-0. The Crimson Tide winning the Iron Bowl, having not lost an SEC game since 1972's double block punt debacle versus the Tigers. Safe to say they haven't forgotten. Richard Todd ran for 2 touchdowns and threw for 2 more, while the defense held Auburn to only 154 yards. For Auburn legend Shug Jordan, it was a sour end to a great 25-year coach run. For Bama, while the Missouri debacle cost them any shot at a national title, they are once again SEC champions and will christen the first ever indoor Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Chris, Alabama roll tide as they move on. Richard Todd, is he bringing back memories of Joe Namath with runs like this? And you got to remember,
Well,
this
he
is Joe
looks like
Namath in Alabama, not with the Jets.
well, he looks like him at some point, and it's ironic because remember last week he threw some touchdowns to Ozzie Newsome, so it's not just a running thing. But Alabama, they've got to be kicking themselves for Labor Day night, that Monday night against Missouri, because they could easily be in that, title hunt should Ohio State or OU falter. They could be an A&M spot.
Mark, Alabama is one of the teams that produced Super Bowl winning quarterbacks all over the place. They had the first 3 Super Bowls were won by Bart Starr and Joe Namath of Alabama. I believe Ken Stabler was a Crimson Tide as well, although he hasn't won a Super Bowl
Yes.
yet. Is Richard Todd a Super Bowl caliber quarterback coming out of the Crimson Tide?
I don't know that we'll see. Anybody that comes out of that university has a decent chance. They don't put up mediocre players out of that university.
By the way, Mark, just remember this name out of Alabama, Ozzie Newsome.
Okay, I'll remember that name.
All right, guys, it's time for Sunday. That was a pretty light day of college football as we are at the end of the season. But let's quickly take a look at the roundup Army scores. But Navy wins 30-6. Fruitless years ends with a Hall touchdown. Charles, Army Navy wasn't as close as we had hoped. I mean, where do we go from here?
I'll leave it up to Chris and Morgan, you for the more seasoned football experts for your take on where Army goes from there.
Well,
Chris, your
remember,
opinion?
Army had not scored against Navy in 74 and 73, so they did actually score against them, but this is a poor team. And remember, Navy does have a winning record, and Army is kind of struggling. So Navy is a better team. So outcome wise, it's not a surprise.
I love his opening
If
line.
the Army may be what you can be, that does not necessarily apply to the football team.
I love this opening line. Philadelphia, November 29th, by Dave Hershey. Maybe it's time to call out the Marines, or bring in George C. Scott to punt. Tell John Wayne to park the covered wagons and run a fly pattern to the nearest goal line. But whatever you do, hurry. The long gray line is about to disappear.
Wow.
Speaking of other news, and down in the ACC, Greensboro, North Carolina's tailback Mike Voigt was voted the Atlantic Coast Conference leading rush. Not voted. He is the Atlantic Coast Conference's leading rusher. We haven't talked about him when we've mentioned all of the running backs coming out of uh, college football, but he is the best of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Vinny, you should know this guy. Remember the North Carolina Notre Dame game? He was in that game.
Out in New Brunswick.
Okay, guys, I gotta get going.
Okay. Bye, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Yep. See you soon.
Rutgers Salt Syracuse 21-10. Edwards goes for 149. That's Rutgers fullback Kurt Edwards. The senior from Mattawan lugged 33 times for 149 yards, lead Rutgers to a 21-10 win over Syracuse before 22,000 at Rutgers Stadium.
Rutgers 7 straight win, and Rutgers not only did they win 7 straight. How about Rutgers' record is 9-2? That's just Rutgers we're talking about.
Late night, Saturday into Sunday, Arizona versus Arizona State. Number 8 Arizona State burns the Wildcats 24-21. This was for all the marbles in the WAC conference. 10-0 Arizona versus 9-1 Zona. Winner goes to the Fiesta Bowl against Nebraska. The Wildcats seemed to be on their way as they took a 14-10 lead thanks to forcing 2 turnovers to set up their touchdowns. But Dennis Sproul came through, throwing 2 touchdowns to John Jefferson and running for what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. It marked the Sun Devils' 6th conference title in 7 years and a chance at true validation against a mighty Big 8 team. Charles, how about that? Arizona State going to the Fiesta Bowl against Nebraska. Do they stand a chance?
Depending on who they play in the Fiesta Bowl. Who do they play?
They play Nebraska.
Say the Cornhuskers are probably going to be heavily favored, but don't expect Arizona State to just roll over and die.
Hey, just remember they've beaten Florida State and in this game before, so it's not like they can't beat major conference teams.
Yep. All right, we're not done yet. Charles, San Jose State played Hawaii late. The game comes in at 2:03 a.m. is their final. 2:05. The Rainbow Warriors shock San Jose State 30-20. Hawaii looked every bit the part of a 3-touchdown underdog in falling behind 20-6 against a team whose only loss coming in was to co-Pac 8 champion Cal. But in a stunning turn of events, the Rainbow Warriors refused to lose with 24 unanswered points and 4 interceptions, one of them a pick 6. For one night, a team that plays at Aloha Stadium, you could say, looked like Pro Bowlers.
Yep. And I don't know what happened with my future alma mater, but we were just flat tonight.
They weren't flat. They had a lead. They blew a lead. They had a healthy lead. You were up, 20-6? You had a healthy lead. You were a 3-touchdown favorite. You just turned the ball.
It's never easy to travel to Hawaii. Even if you're coming from California, it's never easy to travel for Hawaii and get up for a game. Hawaii sometimes pulls off these random upsets against teams. All right, taking a look.
Ask Alabama.
Previewing the weekend in the NFL, Vikes versus Skins, Bengals versus Oilers. Emotions are a key in these two games. Charles, big weekend in the NFL. You got the undefeated Vikings taking on Washington, who is hanging on for their playoff life. The Bengals and Oilers battling for that wild card, trying to get back maybe in the AFC Central. Have we had a big week of football bigger than this year in the NFL?
It could be. It depends on how competitive these two games are. For the Redskins, they have to win those ball games. They need a bad.
Vinny, which game do you think is the bigger game of those two?
I think Minnesota and Washington. Washington's been on a playoff run here, and if they stumble and lose to Minnesota, they could be done. I mean, and Minnesota being undefeated, it's no tall task for the Redskins to go in there and win. Looking at the lines, the Steelers are favored by 15 over the Jets, the Cowboys by 12 over the Giants. Cleveland, after their win last week, they're a 7-point favorite over the Saints. Charles, your 49ers are a field goal favorite to beat the Eagles. The Colts by 7.5 over the Chiefs. The Packers by 10 over the Bears. Marks Broncos looks like 9.5 over the Chargers. The Vikings 3.5 over the Redskins. How about the Raiders, a 14-point favorite over the Falcons, and the Bengals a 3-point favorite over the Oilers? Tomorrow night on Monday Night Football, the Dolphins are a 7.5-point favorite over the Patriots.
You want to pick if you're looking for an upset or whatever, we picked the Miami Houston a couple. Anyone want to pick an upset among them?
Nope.
I'm not going to pick this time.
I'm going to go a little conservative, especially knowing what I do know. So I'm going to try to avoid what I do know. But I'm going to say they don't win, but the Bears cover. They're not going to lose by 10 to Green Bay.
I'm gonna say Atlanta makes it interesting against Oakland. Remember, Oakland's just coming off that Washington game, and the AFC West. I don't know if they have to win this one. I think Atlanta can make it close.
Real quick, reporting some high school action in New York. Great Neck North, Port Washington. They're in the COP playoffs. Farrell clinches the top spot. Croton Harmon is number 1. And that is your New York City, Long Island area high school report. All right, another more NFL preview. The Jets blockers and tackle are the best line in football, according to this New York area newspaper. And TD passes leave Giants Brooks babbling as they get ready to battle Roger Staubach.
Jets blockers, tough task. They got to face the steel curtain.
A little college roundup of some non-top 20 action. Let's real quick report. Boston College in Worcester knocking off
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross,
Holy
24-10.
Cross.
Vanderbilt upsets Tennessee. An 18-yard field goal by Mark Adams, his 12th of the season, gave the underdog Commodores a 17-14 victory. Lehigh.
And by the way, I want to mention 50 years later, Vanderbilt will win at Tennessee again.
Lehigh is beaten 35-21 in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania by New Hampshire. VMI beats Connecticut, that's Virginia Military, 13-3 as Kim Caldwell put Virginia Military in front with a 21-yard run early in the third quarter. And the Cadets went on to a 13-3 victory over the Huskies. Southern Miss a 42-14 victory over Brigham Young, BYU, as quarterback Jeff Bauer. And an effective running game enabled Southern Miss to trounce the Cougars. Baylor toes Rice 25-7, and North Texas is a winner 16-15 over West Texas.
West
North
Texas.
West Texas. No word on if it was the same. Was it West Texas and Necessary Roughness? Was that the school or East Texas?
I think so. I think it was West Texas.
All right, real quick before we get in the NFL action, we're going to be looking at touchdowns from a few games. We got Cleveland, we got a couple from Cleveland, we got Pittsburgh, we got Kansas City, we got Baltimore, and Oakland and Minnesota. Okay. So we got quite a few touchdowns to take a look at, but let's get to the scores. Steelers versus Jets. Pittsburgh stops New York 20-7. One might think the Steelers would have let down on a short week after the big win on Monday night at Houston. 213 yards rushing and 4 takeaways later, Charles, it's apparent that outside of O.J. Simpson, can anybody even touch the steel curtain?
Quite likely, no. Not the way their defense is going right now.
Vinny, what does this say about O.J. Simpson? Again, what they've done since then. What does that say about O.J.?
It's just an amazing effort that he went into Pittsburgh the way he did and put as many yards up against the Steelers as he did. And here, Terry Bradshaw shows off his athleticism as he ducks under a sack attempt by the Jets and heaves a bomb on the run to Franco Harris. This reception may not have been the immaculate reception, but it goes for 6 from 42 yards out as Pittsburgh crushes the New York Jets.
A rarely seen Franco Harris receiving touchdown.
Yep. To say John Reeves' performance in a big slot was unexpected would be an understatement.
I don't know if the Houston Cincy thing was completely saved. Maybe I didn't time everything correctly on the schedule. I know I tried to schedule every game.
Well, let's put it in the back pocket. If we get through the 1 o'clock games and you haven't seen it yet, you can interject. But the Saints, let's move on to the Saints versus Browns. Cleveland makes sinners out of New Orleans 17-16. When the Saints led 16-3 after 3 quarters, it looked as if last week's Bengal shocker was an outlier, but the Browns, finally playing a beatable team after essentially 3 months of playing formidable foes, roared back in the fourth quarter. Even down 13, having played the likes of Pittsburgh, Houston, Minnesota, and Washington, meant they weren't afraid of the Eights. Charles, the Browns are now hot. They're on a 2-game winning streak. Not that it matters any.
Again, that schedule. I think that schedule kind of, think about Cleveland has basically played only one team with the losing record all season, and for once they actually get to play a crappy team. And look at that football weather.
Yeah, look at the field there in Cleveland as the trailing 16-3 against the hapless Saints in the fourth. Mike Phipps started to try and shake the label of trade bust off himself as he hit Reggie Rucker from 33 yards out. Don't know why. Sometimes it just replays.
Oh, I think I know what happened. I think I know what happened, Vinny. I was scheduling these when I was in Seattle. Maybe the time zone difference.
It's all right. We'll get to it. Here's another touchdown. This one, Greg Pruitt slugs his way through the muddy turf at Cleveland Stadium for an 8-yard game winner against New Orleans.
Is this your type of football weather?
This is beautiful football weather when you can't read the numbers on the back of the jersey anymore. It's been a good game. This is when you really have to dig down to. Here we go, Chris. Cincinnati drills Houston 23-19. This was basically a wild card elimination, 8-2 versus 7-3. The winner still having to fend off whoever doesn't win the AFC East. Cincy came in off a stunning loss at winless Cleveland and playing without top gun Ken Anderson. But backup quarterback John Reeves, at one time college football's all-time passing yards leader, turned back the clock to his Florida days. On a rainy day at Riverfront, he threw for 2 touchdowns and made no mistakes on a day the Oilers had 3 turnovers. Cincy has now swept Houston and still get another crack at Pittsburgh before all is said and done. For Houston, 0-4 against the Bengals and Steelers is a playoff death knell, Chris. But considering where his team was just a few years ago, they are still trending in the right direction. What are your thoughts on Houston and Cincinnati?
Houston has come a long way, but they've still got a ways to go. I mean, they've went from winning, one game a year to playing meaningful football in November. But what they basically found out is there are levels to this. Against Cincy and Pittsburgh, they've beaten everybody else. They beat Miami, but again, beating Miami is one thing, but Cincy Pittsburgh is a little bit of a different animal.
Chiefs versus the Colts. Baltimore corrals Kansas City 28-14. Any thoughts of a Colts letdown after last week's huge win at the Orange Bowl disappeared after a 42-yard Baltimore pick six? The sack pack dropped Len Dawson 7 times as Kansas City looked nothing like the team that had upset Dallas and Oakland. Charles, meanwhile, the Colts have won 6 straight, but with Buffalo's Thanksgiving win, there is still work to be done in the AFC East.
Hey, oh my God, I hope the Dolphins lose their game later today.
And for the second week in a row, this date in touchdown history features Lydell Mitchell as he goes for another win. Baltimore secured another win when Lydell Mitchell went 70 yards against the Chiefs early in the third quarter to go up 21-0.
Charles, if I may quote the great Chuck Thompson, who you're familiar with from his Orioles days, go to war, Miss Agnes.
Yeah.
Colt Club, 4100 Baltimore, Maryland. I wish Mark was here to see this one again. Another Penn State running back, Lydell Mitchell, breaking another long touchdown run. This one 70 yards against Kansas City.
How do you feel about this, Vinny? Now the Colts have won 6 in a row.
Well, it's definitely putting the heat on Buffalo. I mean, it's a great position to be in when both your teams have a chance to make the playoffs, but likely only one of them is gonna. Obviously, if I were actually alive at the time when Baltimore was moved in the AFC East, it would have driven me nuts having them both put in the same division. Not just the same conference, the same division, because I would have had to choose. And hindsight gives me the ability to say Buffalo, but I don't know. I would have been a Baltimore Colts fan if I was, my age then during the Johnny Unitas era, so it would have been hard. Charles, we move on to the 49ers. The 49ers are the Eagles as Philadelphia strikes gold versus San Francisco 27-17. The Niners outgained Philadelphia 405 to 277, but turned the ball over 7 times. Bill Bergey basically accounted for half of that with 2 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries. After being on the right side of a previous turnover fest, San Fran now knows how the Aints and Chiefs felt. That basically eliminates San Francisco from any chance, Charles, at a wild card.
That's just too bad. But we need a stable quarterback, and maybe we need a stable offense. Maybe Jim Plunkett we could get in the offseason.
Well, and keep in mind, Charles, and remember, Steve Spurrier, he might be lost in the expansion draft. They may have to get a quarterback. I don't know if they're going to keep Spurrier.
Who knows?
Does this help the Eagles head coach Mike McCormick save his job?
Well, it definitely helps because this is a team that's been humiliated by the Rams on Monday night. They choked the lead against St. Louis. if you're Philadelphia, you basically take whatever you can get, especially considering you're basically an afterthought to the Stanley Cup champion Flyers.
Here's another thing just to mention one of the quarterbacks of all time for the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike Borrelia, Alphabet, Mike Alphabet.
Mike Borla.
Bears and Packers. Remember, I had said that the Bears could cover. The Packers were a 10-point favorite, and I was wrong. Green Bay packs away Chicago 28-7. How does one get excited for battle of 2-8 teams? The football's oldest rivalry on an icy field and a wind chill of -2. Basically, the essence of cold weather football. Fittingly, on a day better suited for playing hockey, John Brockington would have a hat trick with 3 touchdowns. Chris, anything to add to that?
Wow.
Well, if you're going to have 2 crappy teams, you might as well have crappy weather. And if you thought the mud in Cleveland, look at that football weather. I mean, if you thought the mud in Cleveland was football weather, what do you call this?
Touchdown.
God. But then 10 years later, Tampa Bay or Green Bay will say, hold my firstie.
Yep. No doubt. All right, we got Giants and Cowboys. Big game for the Cowboys as they snore past the Giants 14-3. This game marked the first time in 10 years that Dallas didn't play their traditional late November Thanksgiving home game. This game, though, basically felt like a tryptophan nap. No scoring after the first quarter. But Doomsday stymied former Cowboy Craig Morton, and the Cowboys' offense did just enough. With this win, combined with the St. Louis looking like turkeys on Thanksgiving, next week is for all the NFC East marbles. Chris, Cowboys not on Thanksgiving. Is this something that the NFL experimented with? Was it a success or a failure?
I think it's a mixed bag because Dallas didn't look that great. As bad as St. Louis look, it's not like the 14-3 game would have been that much more appealing because, at least the Bills are exciting. I mean, can you imagine if CBS, if they had to put a 14-3 game on Thanksgiving?
Falcons and Raiders.
Oh, Vinny. By the way, Vinny, I answered your question. The reason the times look weird is because I posted these. It's the Seattle time. It is still correct. The times just look screwy.
Nope, that's fine. It's fine. Falcons versus Raiders. Oakland survives Atlanta 37-34 in overtime. Ken Stabler threw 4 touchdowns, and Raiders ran for 286 yards. But the Falcons, 14-point underdogs, gave the Silver and Black a major scare thanks to 3 rushing touchdowns and a rare pick 6 of the Snake. Just as they did last week at Washington, however, George Blanda saved the day in the type of cinematic game Oakland seemingly never loses. With the AFC East an absolute free-for-all, the Raiders have seemingly perched themselves for number 2 seed behind Pittsburgh. For all the talk this season about the Bills, Dolphins, Bengals, Oilers, and now upstart Baltimore, it may just be the Raiders versus Steelers once again in January. Chris, I know you're one of those fans that doesn't like to see the same thing over and over again, so your thoughts on potentially seeing Raiders-Steelers part umpteenth.
Well, on one hand, it does sound like a rerun, but the reality situation is, these teams have taken advantage of the Dolphins getting waffled, and someone's going to have to beat them to do it. And meanwhile, Vinny, props to your Falcons. They played their butts off in this situation. Remember, the Saints went out to Oakland in their division, and they got embarrassed.
Look at this beautiful pass from Ken Stabler to Cliff Branch. It's a 40-yard pass. The Falcons and Raiders engaged in a shootout in 75, but the Raiders had the bigger weapons. This Ken Stabler 40-yard pass to Cliff Branch opened the scoring.
Holy Toledo.
Touchdown.
Vinny, I don't know. Vinny, I don't know if you want to say moral victory, but given Atlanta's, would you call this a moral victory?
It might be something to look forward to. Chargers versus the Broncos. Denver short circuit San Diego 13-10 in overtime. It looked like this would finally be the Chargers' day as they intercepted 6 passes and recorded 6 sacks of 2 Bronco quarterbacks. But San Diego's league worst offense recorded only 3 first downs and did nothing with the ball. Their only touchdown came on a punt return. In overtime, the Broncos made it another loss for the luckless Bolts, who are now 0-11. With 3 games to go in a final at Cincinnati and facing a Kansas City team with some good wins, the Jets in 2 weeks might be their best shot to get off the schneid. Charles, the Chargers are 0-11. 3 games to go. How nervous are the fans of San Diego that they're going to set some unfortunate records in the NFL?
If they can't beat the Jets, they could very well go 0 for 14 this year.
And again, look at the other games. Cincinnati, they're going to have something to play for. The Chiefs, they beat Oakland and Dallas.
And it's now time for the main event. Vikings versus Redskins. Washington stops Minnesota 31-30. While one team is pursuing immortality, another was fighting for their playoff lives. That desperation showed early as the Skins, who have already played 3 overtime games in November, jumped out to a 21-0 lead. Then Washington suddenly looked its age as Fran Tarkenton and Chuck Foreman willed the Vikes to 30 points in a late 6-point lead. The Redskins had their backs to the wall, and basically it was now or never. Once more, the future was now as Bill Kilmer willed Washington into a lead with 40 seconds left. But the Vikes unbelievably still got into field goal range with a chance to steal the game, only for Fred Cox's 45-yard field goal to be blocked. It was the climatic end to a game that saw no sacks or turnovers, but high was on drama. Washington ain't dead yet. The Vikings finally tasted defeat, and the 72 Dolphins are popping champagne, and the Vikings have still yet to secure home field, as LA is only one game back. Chris, your thoughts on this wild game as we look at a couple of the touchdowns coming out of Minnesota?
Well, it was a tale of 3 acts because, again, look at Washington. How about this month of Washington? Overtime, Dallas, overtime, St. Louis, overtime, Oakland. And now this. It's like the Redskins have essentially played an entire season's worth of games in a month.
Under pressure.
3rd and 1 late in the game, Minnesota's Chuck Foreman burst in through for a 31-yard hunt. Minnesota had trailed Washington 21-0 at one point and now led 31-24. No, 30-24.
30-24. Again, they were down 21-0, and they had a chance of thinking, oh my God, if they pull us off, it's like, oh my God. Like, you got to remember, the over the hill gang blowing a 21-point lead was unthinkable.
Remember, we showed the Frank Grant touchdown last week against Dallas? Well, here it is again. This one was an editor's pick, as one of our touchdown selectors, John, picked this game winner that knocked Minnesota from the unbeatens. Washington's Bill Kilmer completes a 15-yard pass to Frank Grant that allows the Miami Dolphins to pop the champagne as there are no more undefeateds in the NFL in 1975. Charles, your thoughts?
It was a great for the Vikings to win, continuing the quest for perfection. But the Redskins, they had to have this one to stay a game back of Dallas.
By the way, Vinny, Atlanta plays Washington next week. Can they do the same thing that they... let's see if they can do the same thing.
You can find...
This is actual live footage of the ending.
And you can find that on YouTube, as the CBS partial is preserved for eternity. And that gets us through those 10 days of football, November 21st to the 30th. Your thoughts, Charles, on these 10 days?
Intense game all throughout the Thanksgiving weekend. Once one team tried to perfection ends, and it's really exciting all around.
Just an incredible gamut of these games. You've got the offensive barn burner in Buffalo, the Redskins, absolute cinema. You've got the Miami situation. You've got the college stuff going around. Personally, probably some of the most entertaining games I've put together in this 10-day stretch. Generally very entertaining games. A lot of good games.
And then not to forget the absolute masterpiece of football up in Canada for the Grey Cup. Folks, 10 days doesn't tell a story, but in 2 hours we try to bring you what happened in that 10 days. But instead of giving you an essay on something controversial or something great, I want to thank one of our members here, Chris. All that reading that I did for the games, Chris puts in the tireless work effort late at night to get those results up for you, for me to read and for you to take a look at. He finds the YouTube links, the newspaper clippings. And if it wasn't for Chris, we would just be 3 or 4 guys sitting around twiddling our thumbs as we'd have nothing to read. As I don't have time to do it. So, Chris, at the conclusion of our 6th episode, I thank you for all the effort you put in to making Pigskin Glory a success.
And even on vacation, I still was able to find time. Because remember, all these games from the November 30th stretch, I did all of that in Seattle, which explains the weird times.
So until next time,
Finding the clips is a little easier than I thought. Except for the Niners Eagles, everything else was easy to find.
So until next time, when we move into December here on Pigskin Glory, thanks for watching, listening, and we will see you in 1975.